Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you can.
There we go. Okay.
Can you hear us now? I'm sure you can.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
Still no sound. No sound.
No sound. Anybody, can you hear me?
Nobody said yes. Still no sound.
Can you hear me now?
No sound.
No sound. That's interesting because we're
Okay,
sitting
eliminate one.
cord.
Yeah, one. Here, you go ahead and do it from here.
All right, can you hear me now?
Wait a minute.
I think that's in.
Oh, okay.
Somebody says they can hear me.
Yep. They can hear you.
Okay, so back to the beginning. We are here in Las Vegas today. We have a change of plea for Eric Parker and Scott Drexler. The judge calls it criminal information instead of a charge, the obstruction of a court order. She does at one point say aiding and abetting in there. She only says it once. The way I hear it, it's part of the obstruction of a court order, the written terms of that or something. The max time is 1 year in prison and not less than 1 year probation. It can be up to 5 years probation if they do not do prison time. The prosecution is going to argue for 5 years, and the defense is going to argue for a year or time served, and that's it. The scheduled sentencing date is Friday, February 2nd at 10 a.m. I would assume Scott Drexler's is the same, probably at 10:30. And so both of their deals were very much the same. They pled guilty to an obstruction of a court order. Now, I know Eric Parker had said, you know, anyone who went to a protest, you have to, if you're going to a protest, you have to be ready to take an obstruction charge. You're going to a protest to stop whatever you're protesting against, and that's why he felt like this was something that he could do. This is not a win for the government. Eric was facing over 100 years in prison. Even still in this trial, after the 2 hung juries, he was still facing a 33-year mandatory minimum. One of the charges has a maximum of 20 years, so he could still be looking at 50 to 60 years. So, and we've already know that we're not going to get a fair trial. We have gotten through 2 hung juries, and we don't believe we would lose, but these hung juries could keep going on forever and ever. We really do wish that the end of the last trial would have ended like Oregon. They would have kicked that person off of the jury and it would have been full acquittals. But for us, this is the right choice. So then we go into Dan Love. The judge immediately is limiting the scope of the hearing to the handwritten notes that they are turning in before the hearing even begins. Norwood, who is Payne's attorney, Dan Love is Skyping in from Salt Lake, and Miss Coffrin is in the room with him there from Las Vegas, and then he has Kaplan and Felix, 2 attorneys that are representing Dan Love, with him as well in that room. He has been a special agent in charge of the BLM Region 3, which is Utah and Nevada, since 2012, and he was relieved of that position a few months ago. He oversaw the law enforcement for the BLM area. They talked about the Burning Man festivals, he did that, and the Gold Butte. He was the incident commander. They talked about how long the planning for the operation was going. And it looks like the planning was 2 years prior. They actually had planned to do another operation in 2012 prior to what had actually gone through in 2014. So that was brought up. They said the goal was to remove illegal grazing cattle on public lands. They talk about court orders that give him the authority and when those court orders were actually put in. One was put in 2012. He keeps saying that they were both re-looked at in 2014 before they went through, and Myrie objects to talking about the court orders at all. He says this is an evidentiary hearing, and this is beyond the scope, so we move on. How many people were there, personnel? And he says about over 200. Of course, he can't give us any solid answers. He's giving approximates. And approximately 147 law enforcement officers. That means BLM law enforcement, Park Service law enforcement, and those federal personnel were under his command. He also says that there were more than 20 FBI agents, but that he could not say exactly how many. And that leaves about another 50 people that were civilians. Also, he couldn't give an exact number of the civilians, especially he could not give an exact number of the contract cowboys, because he says he was not the actual person in charge of the contract cowboys, that he had people under him that he would give his commands to those people, they would then give the commands to the other people. And the people under his command would be people like Rand Stover, Logan Bristol, Michael Johnson, and Special Agent Robin Kirkham. He does not, he said a lot of the other people would have been like public relations staff, medical staff. They brought in Tony Szymanski, the lead dispatcher. There was asked if he had communication directly with Szymanski, because she wasn't in his direct command, and he was saying yes, there was lots of questions back and forth because his answers, I do not recall, but I possibly could. He really kind of goes through and plays, well, I'm not for sure that I did, but it is possible. He was asked if he gave the orders and if he had a hands-on management style. This was objected to. It was too vague. And he said he delegates to his people, who then go and delegate the same orders. And it was also brought up that Sal Laurel, Dan Love's boss, the director of the BLM law enforcement, the entire director of the entire BLM, was there on site, but yet Dan Love was still the incident command person. And no one else ever had operational command of the ICP. The sheriff's office never took operational command and was never taken the operational command. He was asked what the objection was, and it was objected to going over the scope. He claims he's trying to get information. He asked, and we see the judge today actually overruling a lot of the objections that the government has, and we were able to get quite a few questions, not answered, but asked, and it answered in kind of a roundabout way. The headquarters was set up with trailers. There was about 7 to 8 trailers. Szymanski was in the dispatch communication trailer, and he was asked if it looked like a dispatch center and that there were printers there, and he was asked if there was a shredder, and he says he does not recall if there was a shredder. He had his own trailer. In his trailer, he had a laptop. He does not know what laptop it was. He talks about his 2009 MacBook Pro. This is a MacBook. All the other PCs or laptops that they have are PCs. MacBooks are used for undercover information only. This is, he says that he has a MacBook and a PC, but he does not know which one was in his trailer with him at the ICP. Undercover computer is government issued. We go through if it was there. At one point he says he had his government PC with him, but then he backtracks and says, you're trying to confuse me with all of these different questions, and that he does not know what computer he had with him. I believe the MacBook Pro is the one that went missing in the investigation into him previously, and that's why they're digging into this. So he keeps going back and says he does not recall. But he was doing undercover computer work that used his undercover computer. The government objects to it, and the judge says it is relevant, and they're going to continue on, but he can't ask questions about what kind of undercover work, just if there was undercover work used in Gold Butte. general, like what is the computer used for, how many laptops were issued to him. He had 2 MacBooks issued, one during Gold Butte, or both had gone missing. He was issued one and then returned that and was issued another. He does not know which computer he was issued during Gold Butte and if it was the one that went missing or not. Of course, he doesn't recall that. He can't answer anything on the timeline. He keeps saying things like, well, if you show me documents, I can read over the document and tell you yes or no. But as it is, he can't recall from so long ago. At one point, Payne's lawyer says he would like to challenge his testimony because he is giving self-serving answers as I do not recall. He says he was issued the MacBook before Gold Butte and he had that computer. He also had another one. He does not know which one was returned to the government prior to Gold Butte or not, but he was immediately issued another one. Then Payne's attorney wants to show Dan Love a document 6009, the 3rd page, attachment 57. This page is subject to a protective order and the seal of this protective hearing. So what is going on is we are all asked to then get up and leave the courtroom for the first time while they discuss what's in this attachment. So we are not privy to that information. Then we are brought back in. Were there pages, documents in these trailers? And then there was a bunch of communication whether the pages were generated there or brought to there. There was both. Things were generated at the compound, things were brought to the compound. What kind of items were brought to the compound? The documentation plan, the emergency contacts, critical incident protocols, fairly large amount of documents that pertain to the planning. Go back into what was on-site printed, if the information was reviewed, or if there was incoming information from other law enforcement agencies via email or any other method. He could not recall that. He says, yes, I have electronic communications, and if you would like me to show me some, I could confirm them, and I would be happy to do so, but he cannot say what way people communicated with him, whether it was via the phone call, whether it was via text message or actual conversation. He was not aware of other people's communication methods underneath him with other law enforcement or other agencies. Once again, they go through a lot. Did you email with other law enforcement officers? Well, I do not recall. And were you aware of any documents that were being destroyed? He said he was in the communication trailer, but there was no talking while you're in that trailer. He said, were you in the communication trailer on the 11th? I don't recall. On the 12th? I don't recall. Any time on the 12th? I don't recall. I never saw any documents being destroyed. Never saw anything being shredded inside that trailer. He has no knowledge of any document being put through a shredder at the ICP, and no knowledge of any destroyed documents. He was asked if he had ever directed anyone to destroy anything pertaining to the Gold Butte. No, he does not recall. Shred anything pertaining to the... No. He said, removed? Yes. We were being forcefully removed. They were told to remove it. Anything that was not nailed down, take away anything that was pertinent to what time frame on the 12th that he asked that. He said after he spoke with Ammon, that is when he gave his officers the command to gather everything that was not nailed down and remove it from the ICP. Sometime after that decision was made, when it was, he couldn't say for sure, but it was after he spoke with Ammon. He says, sweep the trailers. He said, I do not recall what language I used. He's trying to say, well, I didn't know if I recall saying damage it all, shred it all, but he's saying he didn't say damage or shred it. He said take it, but he doesn't know exactly what language he meant. He's thinking he said sweep the trailers. He is not referring to that on the 11th and making sure that it's on the 12th after the decision made that they were surrendering. And the solution was to take the documents with you. Yes, remove the documents so hostile armed groups that were taking over would not get specific information on these officers, things that they could use to then hurt these officers. it was really hard. This is the one point where he really tries to make it like this armed hostile takeover is coming in and they have to get their stuff out. There was no specific order to damage anything, and he does not recall that. And he does not have any direct recollection of doing that.
Along those lines, he mentioned also the notebook that he...
Yeah, okay, we're getting there.
Oh, okay.
So there was PII information that they needed to get out of there so that they wouldn't fall into the hands of the hostile takeover. So then they asked him, was there ever anything that you personally saw that disappeared? And he's like, well, I don't recall. And then he takes that back and he says, well, I can tell you that I never saw my notebook again. So then we go into this notebook. Well, what are you talking about this notebook? And he says, I gave the orders to sweep. I went back into my trailer, and in his trailer he said the maps were taken down, binders were missing, and also his notebook. He doesn't know if the notebook was destroyed. He's just saying that he never saw it again. In his notebook was communications with folks from D.C. What kind of communications? Decisions that they were making that I was not. Pretty much through the direction of people in D.C. making decisions that he disagreed with. So he was writing that all down in his notebook. They were making decisions that I was not. He was documenting what decisions were being made that he was not making, that he was being forced to delegate to his people underneath of him. He says he doesn't know if the notebook is available or not, that just he has never seen it again. Then we go into like what type of situation or what type of decisions were being made for you by other people. And he states, well, he was the incident command person. He was supposed to be in charge of making these decisions. People from DC were making these decisions, and he felt that this is actually why the plan failed, is because he wanted other things to happen and they would not let him do that. Specifically, he was told that they were not to respond to media about false reports of the government's role and the scope and what was going on the ground. He had told that to a number of people above them, and he pretty much said he was yelling and screaming about the false reports and about snipers, and that they should get with the media and the other people to give them press releases to get ahead of this because bad information was going out. Planning would get involving, and you would put your own factual message out. And that's what he was being told that he could not do in his own operation. So then it was asked who was providing communication with Love, and that you was recording in the notebook the things that he must do. There was objections to this, and we never got names. It was just people from DC. Then it comes out that he actually said that there were people underneath him that were responding to orders from people over him that he did not agree with, or that maybe he was not even being kept in the loop at that point. And he's speaking of the 12th. So basically, he's alluding to if documents were destroyed, it was coming from DC. And this is what basically I'm taking. This is not what was said in court. This is what I'm taking from it. He said that there were people underneath him that were responding to communications with other people that he was unaware of. And that, and I think he's talking about Skamansky and her shredding of the documents, because we know through the last trial that there was shredding of the documents. She said it was done, there was an order to do it on the 11th. That's why he was asked specifically about the 11th and about the 12th. And he's trying to say that those orders were coming from people above him and that he was not involved in that. He also goes in to say that he doesn't know what way that the people underneath him were communicating with other people and making decisions that were out of his command. He was told he could not do his job in this respect, and it was a violation of his duty as the incident commander. He can't tell us exactly what is in the notebook. He was asked if he has ever been asked to provide information from his emails. And he keeps saying, well, when people higher than me come to get the information from my emails, They have a server. They can do it without even asking me. And over and over again, Ryan Payne's lawyer, Norwood, asked, but is there someone else that came and asked you specifically for your emails? Someone other than people involved in the Gold Butte investigation team. And he keeps eluding the question. I do not recall a certain request. If you have actual requests, you can show them to me and I will respond to them on a item by item list, but I can't recall exactly what communications, what way people were asking for things from me, and what were people asking. At this time, Norwood brings out another piece of evidence. Once again, this piece of evidence they're about to show Dan Love is under a protective order. So once again, we are asked to get up and leave the courtroom. I believe it was like the third time now, and then they broke for lunch. That's why we had an hour and a half for lunch. So we will go back inside. I believe that, by the way this sounds, it sounds like Norwood is disproving his own testimony with these articles. He gets him to say no, but he's not even saying no. He's saying, I can't recall. It was so long ago. I can't recall. But he is saying dates every once in a while. So the 11th, I think that's going to come into play. And so I'm hoping while the hearing is sealed that they're perjuring him on the stand, and we're going back in for more questions after they reopen this. And I hear that we will have Szymanski in the courtroom a little bit later today. Lots of exciting things are happening. It did seem like Dan Love was pretty much saying that people from DC were making orders over his head, and that's what was going on. So here we have the first proof that people from DC were involved in this from the very get-go. We have over 20 FBI agents at the incident command and the compound center from the very beginning, even in the planning stages, and they took 2 years planning getting this guy's cattle off of land. None of this makes sense. I hear that there is a huge motion going in, or that went in, to dismiss this trial, and I hope we will have more information at the end of the day.
Okay, that's a wrap.